Okay, so thank you for joining our webinar. We are Norcal PTAC. This is becoming a wildland firefighting vendor. So this is about the Forest Service Procurement, VIPR, otherwise known as VIPR. My name is James Forrest. I'm the program coordinator. Let's control the next slide. And we have Christina Jones, our senior lead procurement specialist, leading the presentation today with content. So I just want to talk a little bit about, also want to thank SBDC, the Small Business Development Center of Northern California, for partnering with us for this event. And let's just go over a little bit about PTAC and SBDC before we hand things over to Christina for the main presentation. So we are a small nonprofit, part of a network of centers across the country. We are set up to help small businesses achieve success in the government marketplace. We're hosted by the Humboldt State Sponsored Programs Foundation that is up in Arcata, California, where that red star is. You can see that on the map. And last year, we helped our clients win more than $314 million in government contracts. And that's quite a bit up since 2019. So we are doing this in a number of ways. Everything we do for our clients and for the public is completely free of charge. And the reason we're able to do that is because we're funded by the DLA, that's the Defense Logistics Agency, as well as GoBiz, which is the government's Office of Economic and Business Development with the state. We also get other local funds, but those are our main funding sources. So the way that we get our clients these successes that wind up in $314 million, three basic ways. The first is one-on-one counseling. So we have a team of procurement specialists. Christina is one of them here. And they can meet with you individually to go over just about any topic you can think of. If your business is located in one of these counties in green here, we have 15 counties in our service area, then we can meet with you individually if you apply on our website. And we can have one-on-one procurement specialist counseling, video conferencing, over the phone, email, whatever works for you. So that our clients find this very helpful. You can check out our success stories on our website. We can also, for the clients that apply, we can offer you a bid matching service. The way this works is you sign up through us. It's a free service that we offer. Put in some search criteria that you work out with your counselor. And then you get daily emails that offer you information on bids that have been posted. So we can get, federal, state, local, county, city, even prime contractor opportunities come through this bid matching portal. It goes directly into your inbox so you can stay on top of the opportunities that are available to you. And you can fine tune it with your counselor. The third thing we offer are trainings like this one that you're attending today. During normal times, we also do them in person. So our PTAC staff travel around and hold workshops in different locations. These are always free and you can join from anywhere. So I know there's some folks that are from outside of our service area. That's totally fine. We want you to be here. If you want to check out more events, I'll go over some of them at the end of the presentation today, but you can also look at our website and then look for the calendar button. We post all of the upcoming events on there. But do note, if you are from outside of our service area, then you will not be eligible for the client counseling. But don't be discouraged. There are 94 PTACs across the country. We are just one of them. We're all independently owned, but we partner with each other. So if you are looking for PTAC services in your service area, but you're in Yolo County or Santa Cruz County or LA County, just go to the APTAC website we've located there down on the bottom link, aptac-us/find a PTAC, and look up your local PTAC. They all provide similar services. So we are just one of them. I want to go over also the SBDC's role. We have a partnership with a program called the Small Business Development Center. Similarly to PTAC, they are a network of centers across the country. We have one of the biggest in Northern California here. So they are a nonprofit. They have 18 centers in their service area here. It's all administered from Arcata as well. They help small businesses with every aspect of business creation. So growth, management, operation, financing, all sorts of stuff. So they are a much broader resource than PTAC, where we focus specifically on government contracting, and we really delve into that. They are quite quite a bit more general. So if you're looking for how to get a business loan or something like that, you should go to the SBDC instead. So you can find your local SBDC. I believe once we send out the slides, you'll be able to click on that link. But you can also just Google SBDC. And if you're in Alameda County, for instance, just type that in. It usually comes up pretty easily. I also want to say a few words about COVID-19 resources. Both the SBDC as well as PTAC, we have these pages that compile a lot of different resources on opportunities for businesses, how to mitigate your risks for COVID-19, where to find resources such as government contracts. So please check out these pages, norcalsbdc.org/COVID-19, as well as PTAC's page. I really encourage you to take advantage of these websites. Unlike a lot of government websites, we update it constantly and we keep it chock full of good information. So I think that those are good resources for all of you. All right, so that's about our centers and our partners. Now I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping here, just let you all know that you are muted today for today's webinar. But we want you to ask questions, and the way we're going to have you do that is to put them into the Q&A. We have two options for communicating with one another in this version of Zoom, this webinar version. We have the Q&A and we have the chat. So the chat we want to have be, if you want to say hello or thanks or I can't hear you or something like that. But if you want your question read aloud during the Q&A at the end of the presentation, please enter that into the Q&A. And I'll just say at the start, I'm not gonna, if there's a question in the chat, I'm not gonna see it. I'm not gonna read it aloud. So only questions put in the Q&A will be read aloud. And then everyone can track them all together. So one more reminder, we are recording this session right now. The slides and this video recording will be uploaded to our website and made available to everyone later today. So we don't need to worry about that. If you don't want to take notes, you just want to enjoy the presentation, that's totally fine. All right, I think we're about ready to get started. Christina, this is Christina Jones, our Senior Lead Procurement Specialist, and she is going to take you away here. So thanks so much, Christina. We're happy to have you here.
Okay, good morning, and thank you, James. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Again, I'm Christina Jones with the Norcal PTAC. I'm the Senior Lead Procurement Specialist. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how to get registered with VIPR. I'll explain what that is and why you need to go through this process if you are interested in doing business with the Forest Service, specifically as it relates to participating on fires. So the first slide is a disclosure saying this information is current as I know it to the best of my knowledge as of today. And there has been one update that I actually did find out today. So it's always great to have this slide because things are constantly changing in the government. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about what the prerequisite requirements are, how to get registered in VIPR, and preparing and submitting your offer. And we'll talk a little bit about contract compliance and issues that come up once you're actually registered and you're on a contract. And then we'll have a link with some resources and tips specifically and directly to the Forest Service. So a little bit about the agency. They manage about 193 million acres of public lands, the Forest Service in general. We are, for the purposes of most of us here, and specifically for our PTAC, are located in Region 5. Region 5 is Pacific Southwest, which includes all of California. So these are some things in general that the Forest Service buys. Again, the Forest Service as a whole, not just specifically for VIPR, which, on the Forest Service fire contracts, which we'll be mostly covering. So there are everything, just like a lot of government agencies, if you're familiar with government contracting, they purchase and need most things that businesses need. So, but these are some of the high level categories and areas that they purchase. And we will specifically be focusing on fire and aviation support services, the last bullet here, and how do we get positioned to do business with the Forest Service in that area. So VIPR stands for Virtual Incident Procurement System. And it is basically a system that's designed to submit your offers, if you want to submit an offer or response to an IBPA, which is a incident blanket purchase agreement. So the Forest Service puts out these IBPAs on sam.gov. However, in order to submit a response or to make a modification or any changes, you need to submit it through the VIPR system. So that's what really we're going to focus on today, is how to submit an offer. So this allows, just to kind of give you more of a broad overview, as far as the contracting officers on the other side for the Forest Service, they are creating the opportunities, they award and manage the solicitations through VIPR, even though the actual IBPAs are posted as well on beta.sam.gov. So you can find them there. You can also view them once you're in VIPR. You've set up an account, you can view the solicitation through VIPR, but prior to registration, you can always view it on beta.sam.gov when they're posted. So I just kind of went through this about, you have to submit your response through the VIPR system, but also amendments, modifications, any changes to your agreement during the time once you're contracted or while you're attempting to submit an offer must be submitted through VIPR. So there's been a new change. This is for 2021 as far as how the solicitations are zoned. So we are now part of regions, well, we're still region 5 if you're in California, Southern or Northern California, but the solicitations will be grouped together and we will be part of the West Zone, which covers regions 3, 5, 6, and 10, as you can see from the map. So not a lot of change as far as who your contacts are within the region, as far as a contracting officer, supervisory contracting officer, that will be someone that's will supervise all of these regions. But as far as contacts for region 5, you would still go to region 5's page on the Forest Service website and view the contracting officer that will be responsible for the equipment or the service that you're offering. So here's what's going to be solicited for 2021. And as I mentioned when during the opening slide, that there is one change as far as, if you look at the bottom here, I have heavy equipment as a to be determined because, and just speaking with one of the contracting officers recently, there was a change where they felt that they do need to procure this. If you looked out on the national solicitation list, currently it states that they're not going to be soliciting this year, but there's a brand new change. Has been updated on their site. As far as who the contracting officer that's assigned, that is to be determined, but they will be soliciting heavy equipment this year. And those solicitations, by the way, are expected to come out within the next month or so, so somewhere in February, perhaps early March. So, monitor, continue to check in with PTAC. We will also, post when those are available. Also, you can check beta.sam.gov frequently to see if the solicitation has been posted. But what we're doing is getting prepared, which we can do prior to the solicitation comes out, to be registered on VIPR and ready to submit our offer when it comes out. So here are the prerequisites. You must have an active email account. These are pretty limited as far as what you need to do. Be registered on SAM. SAM is a Systems for Award Management for any of you that aren't aware. You must have a DUNS number, and we at the PTAC can help you get that during a session. If you sign up for services, we have a direct contact line with Dun & Bradstreet, and we can get you a DUNS number on the spot. And then registration with SAM, we can either send you steps to do that, or we can, of course, assist you during a meeting session on getting registered. But these need to be done prior to registering on VIPR. And the third thing is specifically to the Forest Service, you must have an active level 2 e-authentication account. And this is basically verifying you are who you say you are. It's another security step that the Forest Service has implemented and has had in place for quite a while. So let's just talk about that, because that will be a little bit something a little bit different from what you would do as far as regular government contracting, which would always require that you register on SAM. But with the Forest Service, they require you request this level 2 access. which this is a screenshot of the page where you can create an account. And once you create an account, it'll basically ask you to enter your information about yourself and your business. And then it will ask you to visit a local registration authority. So you register for a level 2 account here. We're just continuing what you would see if you were on their site registering. And enter all your information there, and then visit a local registration authority. So this is basically an office that will view your paperwork, what you've entered versus what they see. You bring in your driver's license and they will confirm that you are who you say you are, and then activate your account, usually the same day. So I always recommend that you contact these offices before visiting, because especially with COVID, they may have different procedures. So I did reach out to the Reading local registration authority, and they are still, meeting in person. You need to bring in your documentation. But I've helped a few clients where they've uploaded their information to the Forest Service site, and they were activated without going in. So please check with your local registration authority, which you can find here. Find an LRA, and it'll show all of the LRAs in California. Find your closest one, and then call. And sometimes they don't, you have to leave a message, but wait till they, make sure you get in touch with them before you visit, and find out what their particular protocols are for whether you should come in or whether they authorize without you coming in. So that's basically, I just kind of stress that calling for an appointment at the LRA office is really important. So once you've done that and they've activated your account, you're ready to get registered on VIPR. So there's several steps here. And again, get registered, and then hopefully, assuming once the solicitations are out, submit your offer. So we'll be talking about both parts of that process. So this, by the way, this PowerPoint was pulled from the Forest Service site. Not all pieces, because it's a really large presentation, but a lot of it is I have included here. But you can find the complete complete presentation, by clicking on this link, which will be active when you receive the slides, and take you right to the full PowerPoint. However, a lot of it is included here, but these are the things that I will be covering here, which are how to register, navigating in VIPR, and my company tab, which is basically your company information. What you'll see, we'll look at what's automatically pre-populated by being registered in SAM, and that comes over to the system automatically. How you add a resource. So if you're selling, for instance, heavy equipment, how to add that resource to your offer, and going through the quote process and reviewing agreements. So let's get started with registration. So the first things are to fill in these areas, which is pretty self-explanatory. When you include your DUNS number that we would have obtained, or if you already have it, you put it in here, then it will pre-populate the information that's tied to your DUNS, which will be your address, your company name, and so forth. So that will be pre-populated. Like it says, VIPR checks this DUNS number against SAM. So if it doesn't come up, you won't be able to register. So getting a DUNS is not, the full process. Of course, you need to register in SAM, and that information needs to be match up. So there is an option to refresh. If for some reason you've changed your address, you've updated in SAM, and it's not showing here, go back to your SAM registration, log in, and refresh, and it'll usually should bring up the fresh information or the changes that you've made. And then you can come back to VIPR and proceed. So entering your contact information, again, this is all information that you already have. More on that. And there's quite a few slides here, even though I, condensed this somewhat from the Forest Service presentation. There's still quite a few slides, so we'll be moving through pretty fast, but of course there'll be a Q&A at the end. And also, of course, reach out to us directly through James if you'd like to schedule a session to go over this one by one. We can walk you through the process of getting registered. So this is optional, but also important if you've been certified as for instance, a hub zone or an 8A or any of the small business categories. You want to check off here that you are. There may be a preference, not a preference, but more so if they are not meeting a goal, perhaps, having you listed here, checking off that you're already registered or certified, as that will help them check off meeting a goal, as well as, contracting with you for your product or your services. So now you're registered in VIPR. That part is pretty simple. One, because at this point, just to recap, you have your DUNS number, you have your SAM registration, you've registered for a level 2 e-authentication, and you've gone down to the local registration authority and had your account activated, and then you completed the registration. So that's where we are now. And those are 4 steps just to get ready to be able to submit an offer. So now we're going to look at navigating VIPRs. So at this point, we're registered. A lot of our information from SAM is pre-populated. And so those are just some of just kind of a walkthrough of what you'll see when you first enter the site. The My Company information. This will list, again, what's pulled over from SAM. It'll also ask you some questions about, you'll see what you chose for Hub Zone 8A and so forth. Also, labor surplus area. If you're in an area where there's 20% or more unemployment, you may qualify to list yourself in a labor surplus area, which also, may again give you some advantage. So click on the link that you see there under labor surplus area to confirm if you are in such area. And then now we're looking at just, again, the resource group, just different things you'll see on VIPR when you look at that initial page. You'll see this is someone who's already obviously an example. They have their VIN, their equipment ID, their resource group. And then this over here, if you click on the PDF, that's over in the actions column, that's an actual copy of the solicitation, a full solicitation. And I recommend that you also read through that and see what they're asking, what are you required to comply with. Sometimes companies move through and submit an offer and then they don't look through, and this happens a lot in all government contracting, and don't review the clauses that they're tied to. So please review the solicitation. And again, if you're a client, we'll be happy to walk through this with you. But review the solicitations, because sometimes even if you've been registered on VIPR, 3 years before you were on a contract, there have been changes. There was a change recently, I think in the past year, of the primary NAICS that they were using. So you wouldn't know that unless you read through the solicitation, and sometimes they do send out notifications, but not all the time. It's our responsibility to read through the solicitation. So make sure you take a look at that. And here's, again, you can edit certain company information. You can't edit, of course, anything that comes over for SAM, from SAM populated about your business, because that's tied to your DUNS, or anything that's tied to your DUNS you cannot edit here. But you can edit like your phone number, and you'll want to include a phone number that can reach you quickly and directly, because obviously this is based on incidents that occur, fire incidents. So you want to make sure that it's a number that you answer and that reaches you directly. So more detail about My Company information, your DUNS number. If you have to, you can put a DUNS +4, but it's not required. Again, I talked about editing contact information and editing status details, whether or not you're in a socioeconomic category, you can edit. And then once you've done all of those things, you're finished with your company information, and you'll be able to, this is showing, excuse me, just back up a second. This is showing what's been pulled over from SAM. And you can also, see all of your company information and everything that you've entered. Again, it's just another recap of what you've entered. The next tab that we'll move on to will be My Resources, which is covering the equipment and how you add those resources. So you can add our resource information while you're in the process of submitting your quote. So we'll look through that. And the first thing is you'll want to, what they're showing you here is listing the solicitations that are available, all of the solicitations that are available, and you'll be choosing the one that is applicable for you. So for instance, if you had a, one of these here, a fuel tender, Region 5, you want to also double check that it's specific to your region, because they'll have them all listed here. The nice thing is I haven't seen this yet because they haven't actually released it yet, the new solicitations, but now that they will be categorized by West Zone, by the different zones, there should be less, regions here, so less solicitations to kind of scroll through and easier to pick out what you're looking for. So you can always refresh the solicitations, what's listed here, to make sure it's what's most current, and then view the open solicitation. So again, this is a look at the actual, like say for instance, you found the absolute correct one that you want to bid on, and you click on this link that's tied to number 4 and look at the full solicitation. I think there's a screenshot in the next page. The arrow, the blue arrow, is where you actually submit a quote. So again, you submit a quote with the blue arrow, and when you're doing this is kind of showing you what you will see. So you'll need to go through all of these steps. They're grayed out, but as you go through and you get to the end, you'll see the finished. You'll sign the quote, of course, and then finish it, and that submits it directly to the Forest Service, and then they will be in touch with you by email to either, if they have questions, or of course to award a contract. So there, what you will see is when you want to add a new resource, you'll click on that button, and it'll list all of the resources that are available. And even if there may be resources there that are listed there, but they aren't up for solicitation in 2021. So it will, give you an error message if that's the case. But again, if you go back to one of the beginning slides, I have a list of what's being solicited, and just add to that heavy equipment, which lists on the slide to be determined, but it's actually going to be solicited this year. So what's important to note when you're adding resources is to make sure that before you start to get ready to submit a quote, make sure you have your VIN for your equipment if that's needed. Equipment ID, sometimes there is an equipment ID, but a lot of times it's something that you create. And then the resource category will be determined by, depending on what type of equipment you're listing, or service, if it's like a truck with driver, which is not being solicited this year, but just an example of, a service. So you want to make sure you have that available, because, when you get in here, you really won't be able to move forward without it. Also, just another tip that is important, because you will be sending in pictures of your equipment, pictures of the VIN. Make sure those things are really clear, because under COVID, there you send in those, you mail in, and that was what they were doing last year. I'm assuming it's going to continue this year. You mail in pictures of your equipment and of your VIN, and sometimes they get those things and they aren't clear. So make sure, possibly when you're gathering it to submit the quote, that you just take really clear pictures so you're prepared at the end of the quoting process to mail that in. So setting your rates. So you have your VIN number, your business resource category, and before setting your rates, let's talk about your dispatch center. So you will, your dispatch center will be determined by where you're located. And then also moving on to setting your rates, you'll want to, a lot of times you get the question of, how do I determine what people are charging? So there are a couple of different ways. I mean, you can, of course, look up, through us, for instance, you could look up on your own, but you could also schedule a session with your PTAC counselor, and we can help you research, what rates have been charged in the past. So we can always do that. You can also look at if you have the name, for instance, of a vendor that that is, has contracted for heavy equipment with the Forest Service. You can look up that particular contract and see what rates the Forest Service has approved in the past. I can also help you with finding that if you can't find it. But those are just some of the ways you can determine, because I get that question all the time, what should I charge? Some other questions that we can help you with are, how are people doing? Should I buy this equipment? Sometimes companies are on the fence. They want to buy a piece of equipment and rent it out to the Forest Service. So we can also conduct research on, what types of sales have occurred under that piece of equipment, for instance, in your service area, to see if, just to give you a little bit more information to determine if it's a good investment for you. So when you get to the point of you've entered, obviously your VIN, you've entered a unique ID. I didn't review that. Is basically just a, what you call your equipment. Maybe it's Ford F-150, or in this case, like a chipper or something like that. So once you enter your information, there will be a recap that will show you everything that you've entered. And then you'll agree that, of course, that you understand the rules of the Forest Service ultimately. And then your quote, you'll submit your quote and it'll say successfully submitted. At this point, you're waiting for the contracting officer to pull your quote and review. And typically that's when they'll come back and ask you for, pictures of your equipment, and also like your VIN if that's what's needed. And you have and provide a specific time frame for which you must mail that back. So this is just another option to add a new resource from the My Resource page. Typically for someone who's already had a VIPR contract, going back in to add another resource. And just note that if you had, for instance, a truck, that you added, in a previous contract, and you want to use that same truck for a new contract that the Forest Service has put out, you will have to re-add that equipment. So it doesn't just pull from the old equipment, even though it's the same VIN and so forth. You'll have to re-add the equipment for the new solicitation. So you can manage your resources as a new resource in response to a solicitation. That's what we originally reviewed. And then if you have a resource, again, you have a replacement resource, you can add it under the Manage Your Resources. So this is pretty much showing you what we've looked at before, choosing a resource group, and how you add that, how you classify the resource. So there's a new feature actually that allows you to copy your existing resource. Still, you can't use the original resource, but you can copy or update the resource that you had in there. So that's actually nice instead of having to retype everything. So there's an update option here. So we can bring it into the 2021 quote if that's what you're trying to do for that same piece of equipment and the information is the same. This is just a snapshot of what you'll see. So it's good to refer back to as you're entering information before you get ready to enter your quote information, to make sure you have everything that you need in order to submit an offer. Unless we're working on it together, then you won't necessarily have to look at this screenshot up front. But I think it's helpful if you're submitting an offer and for the first time and you're going to just walk through the process, to make sure you take a look back at this page to know what you need: the VIN, the equipment ID, the license number, of course, the state where your license was issued, if that's the case. So all of these things. And sometimes you will find that there is something that they're asking for that has a red asterisk that's not applicable. And typically in that case, you just put NA to move forward. So just that's another tip. More on the resource description. The other one was more high level. This is a breakdown. And then here we're looking at just some attributes of the water tender. These are not all of the resources, of course, but these are for instance, on a water tender, which is commonly procured, what it would need to have. So also could be helpful if you're considering buying a piece of equipment that you want to make sure that meets what the Forest Service would need. And then again, right here in the center column are things that you need to gather in order to submit for a resource. So this is for a water tender support, tactical weed washing unit. These are just examples, okay, but there are more on the actual Forest Service website. And so those are just, again, these are bits and pieces of the actual presentation that I thought are relevant, how to manage your resources, and then it shows, which was, I think, the slide before, yeah, manage your resources, and then you're finished. So again, you can always view your resource, what you have here, where the resource is located, and the resource needs to be located fairly close to where the center that you're signed up for. So you can't have a piece of equipment that's down in San Francisco, but you're going to be working up in Humboldt. So just remember that as well when you're signing up for as a vendor. This is a complete screenshot recap of the resources page. And it also shows you here when you last updated it. So again, you can look at what you can see here. It shows like 2017, that was when this fuel tender was added. But apparently once you log in, there will be an update where you can move that, for instance, into 2021 if that information is the same. So you can also edit a resource within a quote. So I think this is getting more into really detailed if you are, you already have a quote that's going and you want to come back in and edit that resource that you had. For instance, to update, that's where this update button will occur. This is where you would do it. And changing your company information. Again, you can change certain things in there, but you can't change if your address, for instance, needs to be updated for SAM. The information that you enter here and then SAM must match. So just remember that. And in most cases, you'll need to go back to SAM to update your information, or really specifically Dun and Bradstreet to update your DUNS number, which is tied to your SAM registration. And this is a My Agreements page. So once you have an agreement, you can look at your current agreement, what's active. You can also look at what's expired, what agreement you had in the past. Sometimes they're like this one, it's awaiting vendor signature. It will let you know that they're waiting for something. And sometimes they've been rejected, or there's, are canceled because someone, for instance, did not, complete the other steps. So make sure that you're on top of when the Forest Service sends you a notification and ask you to update some information. Make sure that you go in and sign or submit whatever it is that they ask, so that you'll get removed from the contract. Remember, these are 3-year contracts, and so you don't want to get shut out because there's something that came up during year 1 that you needed to address, and now you can't potentially submit an offer until 3 years, and potentially they may not be soliciting it again in 3 years. So just make sure that once you have an offer to keep up to date. If you have any questions about if there's something you need to do, then like I have many VIPR vendors that just reach out and say, I'm not sure what I need to do here. And then we'll help you, resolve whether there's something you need to submit or if everything is correct. Oftentimes I get 2 questions because your SAM registration must, remain active during the entire time of any government contract, and VIPR or Forest Service is no different. So I have, outside firms that are emailing VIPR vendors and saying your SAM registration is going to expire, and so they're really, nervous and concerned because, their SAM registration is tied to their ability to continue on the VIPR contract, which rightfully so they should be concerned. So, sometimes they'll just email me about those things, and we'll double check that their SAM registration is active, or if it needs to be renewed, we'll assist with that. So just some of the simple things, but sometimes there are changes, like there was a change in, as I mentioned earlier, NAICS code. So the contracting officers sent out an email to those vendors and said, to update based on the solicitation changes. And so making sure that you're paying attention to when they send you a notification to sign an amendment, make a change of any sort, something they may say that's missing from your equipment, please make sure that you pay attention so that your contract doesn't become inactive. So here's another example, like a rollover modification. So they may set a due date for when a vendor must respond to this or to any modification. Make sure you're paying attention that you go in and update these. Again, you don't want your contract to go inactive. And so there are some modifications, this is kind of speaking to, that don't require any response, some that have a specific response date, and some that are used to suspend or resume resources. So make sure you look at what the modification is asking and make the appropriate update. Again, if you have questions, just reach out to the PTAC, we can help you with it. So this is kind of also too, it's a review of a summary of a modification, but it's also a slight little snapshot of what you would see if you had clicked on the PDF I showed you earlier, and it was a link to the entire solicitation. It will always start off with the agreement here, the SF 1449, I believe this one is, and which is basically will turn out to be the actual contract. So it'll start out with this, and it'll move into, what's required, the clauses, and it'll, be a relatively large document like this one. This one's 45 pages. So make sure you review it. If you have any questions or need to walk through it, again, we can always help you walk through how to review the solicitation and make sure that you can comply with the requirements. Because there are changes made from, offer to offer. And so, and sometimes, clients have contacted me about something that the contracting officer is asking them. And I hadn't looked at the new solicitation yet. And we looked at it together and say, oh yeah, the solicitation said requires that, it's made a change from the year prior to the current year. So pay close attention if you can to the PDF when you initially make the offer, but also, as you go along and modifications are requested from the contracting officers. So it's just showing you how to respond, which is pretty simple. Usually click on the box and agree. Again, you can preview the modification like we did on the previous slide. You can see I have an error message here. You'll see that if, for instance, you make some changes here that don't match up with your SAM record. So again, you'll need to go back to Dun & Bradstreet to update typically, and then SAM. And then Dun & Bradstreet will make the changes, 24 to 48 hours, it'll push to SAM, and then you should be able to refresh it here. And notice, like it mentions here, the status of a modified agreement. And now once you submit it, it indicates awaiting contracting officer's signature. So this again is if it's in their court, then you're in pretty good shape. It's just that if it's waiting for you to do something, you want to make sure you've done your part, and that you watch your emails, your emails, your spam email, to make sure that you don't miss any calls for you to send additional information. Because I've seen many companies that have been thrown off track, not been able to participate on the current incident because they haven't kept their VIPR contract up to date. So here's an example of no vendor action, acknowledgement only. So it'll say it right there. So again, you can view it in the little PDF what the change is, and they've already signed this agreement as it mentions here, and it's just notifying you that there's no action needed, a modification is in effect. All right, I moved through that pretty quickly. And it gives us some time for questions. So here's some links directly to the Forest Service site. And there is one more link I would like to add. to Region 5 site, which lists the current equipment that's being procured and has an update, like I mentioned, to mention heavy equipment. Does not list who the contracting officer is for all of these things yet, because it's to be determined for many of them. But it's something that you should use as a point of reference, go back to kind of make sure you have the most current information about what's being procured. And hopefully soon they'll provide more information on their site about the new West Zone, if any changes are caused by the, by the new region. So what I've been told so far is that it will basically just combine the regions, and then there will be one contracting officer supervisor that will supervise for all of those regions, and that the solicitation itself will be combined in the same for all of those regions. But any management as far as questions about your equipment and your region and so forth, you still go back to your contracting officer if you're in Region 5, which will be from this site. And with that, I will turn it back over to James quickly, and then we'll go into the Q&A.
Perfect. Yeah, before we go into the Q&A, I just want to go over a couple of our upcoming events. If you enjoyed this one, you found it useful, we're also going to have some information on going over local contracting. It is technically specific to Shasta County, but honestly, it's going to be applicable for anybody looking to do with county contracting. So that's on Thursday, January 28th, coming up in a week. We also have how to do business with the California Bureau of Reclamation, BOR. That is on Thursday, February 11th, if you're interested in that. And if you are a woman-owned small business, it can be really helpful to get the certification, the WOSB for that. And we will talk all about that on Wednesday, February 17th. All of our webinars typically are at 10 a.m. and you can find them all at our website, norcalptac.org/calendar. All right, looks like we have about 15 minutes for questions here, so let's get right to it. All right, looks like we got a couple questions. Feel free to enter them into the Q&A window here. First question comes from Kylie, who's wondering, how often do they fly the follower module solicitation for fire contracts?
I can't answer that specifically because, as you know, I mean, kind of I mentioned, things change so much, like they're soliciting heavy equipment, which was not on the list. There is a national solicitation list, which is part of the links that we're sending. But that list gets updated sometimes. So it goes out, I think, to 2023 or maybe even 2024 as far as what they solicit each year. So you would find the follower module on that list. However, I would recommend, again, if you are in Region 5 or whatever region you're in, that you check the regional site to see if there have been updates to when they're going to solicit this. But just remember, it's always going to be, once you're on contract, it won't come up for the solicitation, at least for a year, but potentially for another 3 years because you'll already be on contract.
Okay, thank you. What triggers an under protest action? Nancy is wondering.
I'm not sure about what that question, I'm assuming you're speaking of, and correct me if I'm wrong, you as a vendor have a conflict with the Forest Service as far as the contract or equipment that you've submitted, and perhaps they've changed your contract in VIPR to under protest. Is that correct, or is there something else that you're asking?
We will have to wait and see.
We could revisit that, directly. If you want to send a question to James, we could talk about specifics on where you've seen that, and then I can help you.
Perfect. Okay. Miller is wondering, our chipper is only in regular work 40% of the summer. My question is, can these contracts be flexible enough to be understanding of the limitations of time availability when the resource order comes in? Can we as an organization say no to 50% of the resource orders?
I mean, you can say no, but, people are, of course, clamoring to be called out on the fires as well. So from what I understand, just as this basically from my conversation with other fire vendors, the Forest Service contracts typically work pretty well around other private contracts, as far as, they may call you out for, a certain period of time, and it usually works well around other contracts where, say, for instance, a CAL FIRE, they call you out for, a solid week, 24 hours, and that would interfere with you, completing your other contracts. So yes, you can always say no, but, this is something to consider. It may work around, what you're already doing.
Okay. Someone is wondering, when do the 2021 solicitations become available, or have they already done that? And where can we find them without having a VIPR account?
Okay, so they have not become available yet, unless they've become available while I've been on this webinar or something, but they should be available within the next month. I'm told sometime in February, possibly early March is what the contracting officers are saying. And you can always find those on, without having a VIPR account, on beta.sam.gov.
Perfect. Azalea is wondering, if it's not outside the scope of the webinar, could you discuss the requirements that the USFS must abide by when selecting a contractor? For instance, are they required to choose the lowest bidder or some other criteria?
Their criteria is basically, once you've negotiated that contract, you submitted it through VIPR and the agreement has been approved based on your daily rate. There's no further, they've already kind of agreed to your pricing. So if it's not like in the case of a contract, I'm thinking it's kind of referring to where you're all submitting quotes and it's based on the lowest bid. They may have that this will be going to the lowest bidder. But this is based on them agreeing on what you requested in your quote and them agreeing to that. So once you're on agreement, that price is good for 3 years, unless they make a modification. Of course, it could, the government could, under the FAR regulation, could terminate it for convenience or make other changes. But that, again, you'd have to agree to through an amendment.
Thank you. And someone's asking about the slides. Yes, they will definitely be emailed to all participants, so no worries. Kyle is asking, can we solicit to the West zones if we are on the border of Region 4 and 5?
You couldn't do that prior, but again, this West Zone information is very new. I'm able to get very limited information from the Forest Service so far. But in the past, you had to, only could solicit where you were. You could not go out. So I'm not sure if the West Zone will open that up, but we'll hopefully find that out within the next few weeks.
Stephanie is asking if you have to take an 8-hour incident safety awareness for hired vendors class.
There is a incident safety class that you do have to take, and I would have to, speak with you specifically about, the links for that, but depending on what you sell also.
Okay. Anna Lee doesn't want to miss the sign-up period for VIPR solicitations. Have they started? Has there been a cutoff, and is there an inspection period for new equipment? Businesses in CCU.
Yes, there is. Well, they haven't been started yet because, the solicitations haven't been released. Again, they should be released within the next month, possibly up until early March. So keep checking beta.sam.gov. You can put in the key search VIPR, or you can put I-BPA for the incident-blanket procurement agreement and see what comes up if there's anything that's current. You can also log into SAM, create an account, create an alert for VIPR IBPA. And so that way, notify you. Sometimes I find it's a little bit inconsistent because SAM is still in the beta stage and there's still some, some problems there. So, but you can still create an account. Hopefully they'll notify you, but also just check it from time to time. Also, we'll be tracking it as well at the PTAC, and we'll put a notification probably on all of our social media, as well as our newsletter when the solicitations are available. And I think there was one that you took the question away, but I thought there was one other piece, but is that it? Or is it in the answer? I don't see it.
I moved it over to the answered tab so everyone can see it.
Let's see.
Is there another piece to the, let me see.
maybe not.
Have they started? Is there a cutoff, and is there an inspection period for new equipment?
Oh, okay, yeah, the inspection period. So the cutoff the solicitation would have a due date. So that will be the cutoff and will be determined once they're released. The inspection period, once you submit your offer within the time frame that they allow, then the contracting officer will reach out to you and provide you the information, email you about what you need to provide and by what time frame it needs to be submitted.
Great. Miller is wondering, is there a what's the best way to find specific requirements for each resource area? I.e., does R5 define a type of engine and its equipment?
I'm not sure if that is on their website. There is some information, but I can't speak specifically to of all the types of equipment they've described exactly what they need on their website. But I know there is some equipment information on their website. I'll put a link in at the end where you can access that directly.
Okay. Julie is asking if the scheduled solicitation year for my equipment shows 2020. Has this window been missed? I know it's based on fiscal year, but this is unclear.
So I'm sorry, where is that question? I don't know. It'll help me to actually see it.
Yeah.
Oh, if the schedule solicitation year for my equipment shows. Okay. No, it's probably, that's the solicitation that you're on. The new solicitation will show 2021. So, and it is based on fiscal year. So, they follow the government's fiscal year, but which is through October 2020. So 2021 is already in effect, but the actual solicitations for 2021 have not been released, so you haven't missed it yet.
We do transport of heavy equipment and have been having a very hard time trying to take that 8-hour class because we don't know where to sign up. Okay, this is Stephanie again.
Okay, okay. So let's, James, connect with James and perhaps he'll connect you with me and then we can find out exactly where that class is.
Yeah. Yeah, the info, I believe that there was my email address will be on the slides, but you can email me at info@norcalptac.org. Okay, let's see. Joe was wondering about if there's any need for goats and fuel reduction. Is that something that the government contracts for, specifically in Shasta and Trinity counties?
If they purchase that, that would be outside of VIPR. And they probably do purchase, I know they do purchase some like goats and things of that too, for the grass. But it will be outside of VIPR, outside of the scope of this presentation.
Okay. Rachel is wondering about finding an insurance company that provides us general liability insurance required for these agreements. Do you have any guidance on that? I know we're not going to recommend any specific companies, but any advice on that?
Yeah, we don't recommend any specific companies, but I do have some lists that the SBA provides as far as some different agencies that can help support in this area. So reach out to me. I think Rachel Campbell, I think is a client of mine. So reach out to me, Rachel, if you are, and I will provide you those links.
Perfect. All right. And you can sign up to VIPR before solicitations become available, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's what we're hoping to do. You're going to do with the information today is to get your account completely registered, go down to the local registration authority, complete your SAM, done. It's not in this order that I'm giving, but complete all of those things to get, and then add your resources so that when the solicitation comes out, you can attach your resource to the solicitation and submit your quote.
Sounds good. All right. I believe that we have reached the end of our questions here. So unless you have something else, Christina?
I was just going to say, I will provide the email that I was referring to James, because he's going to send out the slides, and then you could just send that with the slides.
Sure, yeah, just send it over. I'll include it. So yeah, as Christina just alluded to, we have been recording this, and the video as well as the slides are going to be posted to our website, norcalptac.org/webinars. You'll find it there. I will also email you with a link later today once it's uploaded. And thank you everyone for joining. I hope you found this useful. When you leave this webinar, you're going to be directed towards a page that has a Google Docs link. That is our Google form for our satisfaction survey. It's actually really important to us that you fill it out. So if you could just take like 1 or 2 minutes, you can do it anonymously and just let us know how you felt. It helps us improve our services, and it means a lot to our funder as well. And thanks also to Christina Jones for leading an awesome presentation. And once again, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, James.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.